welcome back to another episode of Power Rangers Lore. And this is the final episode of this week's special of the RPM series, and introducing two characters this time rather than just the one Ranger, but Gem and Gemma. Now, why am I doing them together? Well, they are kind of always together in this series, only with a few parts being separated. They are very similar characters, but one will go on to have a much more bigger impact on this series and on other series as well. Now let's get into the series about Gem and Gemma, the Gold and Silver Rangers. Now, we would only see these characters midway through the series. They were grand total of 20 or so RPM Ranger episodes of the 32. Now, they would only be shown in their uniforms the first two episodes of them showing up, and then it is later revealed of who they are exactly. Now, without telling their backstory, I would have to bring in the character of Dr. K, because their backstory is very segmented, because you see mostly from the backstory of Dr. K the entire time. Now, we can imply that they have very similar backstories, and we're going to go over Dr. K's point of view of their backstory. Now, they were both Dr. K, Gemma, and Gemma being at Alphabet Soup, which was a strange organization, I want to say evil organization, that kidnapped these children and told them they could not go outside because it was dangerous, that the sun killed them, or whatever the lie they would believe. Now, Dr. K's point of view, she was to build things for them. Now, this didn't mean just Zords and stuff like that. It was early in the project of Project Ranger, but they would want her to build weapons or figure out these formulas. They didn't seem to have any connection at all, and as a kid, she was listened to her grown-ups and did what they said. However, she always began to question why she was never outside. One day, they would bring these two strangers, Gem and Gemma, to her, and they would basically be test pilots, though equally as smart as her, though they were very strange in her opinion. They were annoyingly so, hyperactive, and constantly bouncing off the walls. So preppy, it hurt. Now, the complete opposite of what Dr. K was at the time, because she was a very closeted girl. She was basically science. I want to go outside, and it was never allowed. So she's like, I have to be a good girl. I have to do what they say, and I can go outside one day, even though it might hurt me. Well, through these characters, she came to open up and realizing that she could be close friends with them. They were just like her. They were smart as her, or even smarter, be able to understand the same scientific backgrounds in Zord creation, as well as a few other things going on. Now, Gem and Gemma would not talk too much what they were doing besides being test pilots for certain things, and a super secret, top secret project of the gold suit and the silver suit. Now, Dr. K would find out that they were being lied to and would warn them, and she would start to figure out a plan. This is where Dr. K would create the Vengex virus. Yes, the evil villain of the main series was created by Dr. K. Spoiler alert, it's only been about 10 years since that series came out, but if you don't know anything about it, I just ruined it for you. Now, Dr. K would do it to basically infest the systems of Alphabet Soup to release her and her friends, as she calls them, to get out and be away from this evil organization. Now, before this was able to be put a firewall to protect it from getting out beyond Alphabet Soup, the evil members of Alphabet Soup would stop her and attempt to kill her. Yes, in a Disney show, they would flat out try to murder her, but would be stopped by Gem and Gemma and their kung fu moves. Because they were test pilots for this super weapon, they had to know these fighting styles. So they would end up saving Dr. K and get her out. Would also say at the same time, we need to go back to get our suits. When they would go back, the roof would collapse, seemingly killing them. In truth, it just cut them off from a corridor, and they were not seen again for a whole year. Thus the start of the Battle of Corinth and the Siege of Corinth. Now, Gem and Gemma would later appear in when the main group of Rangers goes and looks for some evidence for Dylan, and Gold and Silver would save them several times from the fully new-bodied form of Vengex, who was out seeking them, while seeking the Rangers in a trap. Now, Gem and Gemma would fight them off in their different Zords. Now, strangely enough, there'd be 1 through 5 for the Rangers, and then Gem and Gemma would be 7 and 8, though they were the 6th and 7th Ranger. This was never explained, besides the fact that they had 7 or 8 printed on their back. In the Sentai, there might have been another Ranger, but I never really checked into that. But it was just a weird coincidence that was going on there, that they were missing a number 6. Now, the Rangers would accept them, but would be very confused about who these people are, and then Dr. K's reaction to them, because she never really opened up to them, and would actually name them. Now, upon Dr. K seeing Gem and Gemma back, it would change her entire dynamic, and she would open up to the Rangers as ever before. Instead of calling them Ranger Black or Ranger Red, she would call them Dylan or Scott, and it would really throw off the Rangers entirely, because they're so used to her being so cold about things. Now, Gem and Gemma were very different from Dr. K. They were loud, preppy, and obnoxious when they were being dealt with, but they were also single-mile in their destruction of the bad guys as they saw them. They would shoot things first and then worry about the consequences later, if there were any. Now, this was completely against the strategy of the people in the dome and the Rangers themselves, who were in a very defensive position. They couldn't go on the attack because they risked too many lives. For the year-long venture, Gold and Silver Ranger did not have to risk anyone but their own lives, and they said if they can keep destroying facilities, why not? They love to blow things up constantly, and I think it was their form of not going insane while watching the rest of the world burn. Now, the Rangers would join up with the Gold and Silver, and they would work together on several different attempts. However, they would come in very different stages of conflict, with the twins being basically constantly together and constantly causing mayhem with their plans, but eventually they were forced to work together. They even got a name, the Boom Twins. Now, at some point, they were allowed to follow under the leadership of Scott, who came to fully understand them, and they were basically to blow up a grinder building for a factory to slow things down, which is what they're really good at. They also learned about certain things about the grind when they were captured as slaves for a bit to work in factories for Vengex. They ran into a blind girl that Dylan would know and identify later on as his sister, which would be Tenaya 7. Now, Gem and Gemma would not have any other interactions reality-wise with anybody else, except for Gemma would. Unlike Gem. Gem would basically just be there for the ride for most of the time. Gemma would have a special episode dedicated to her and Finn, where they would build another Zord, a wheel Zord. Now, it is also hinted that maybe the two kind of have a good click together and would make a good couple. However, it is the only time they were actually ever separated. The twins were always together. Now, it's very interesting that that would happen. It's showing that basically Gemma can handle not being there, but can Gem. He was always with her, and after the series ended and them destroying Vengex, they both would join up under Scott's leadership to join Eagle Squadron to basically defeat the last remnants of the robots left, as well as keeping things under control. They would also respect his leadership. But Gemma would go on from there. Gem and Gemma would show up again in the legendary Rangers episode of Megaforce, but not have any live speaking roles. Now, they would show up in Shattered Grid and be talked about in other occasions, but nothing major. Gem would be the last appearance there. However, Gemma would be a completely different matter. She, along with two others, Coda and Wesley, would go back in time and help out the Ninja Storm Steel Rangers. Not Ninja Storm, Ninja Steel Rangers. Sorry, too many ninjas, so many different Dino Series Rangers. But they would go back in time and different dimensions and disguise themselves in robes to basically test these Rangers and then figure out how well they were. They would also help them, inspire them to get to Super Ranger forms and would later help them fight off Lord Draven, who had kidnapped a bunch of veteran Rangers, as well as Tommy Oliver, and help fight them back. She would have a whole scene dedicated of her morphing and fighting off a bunch of these droids and evil robot Rangers. Now, that would be very impressive for her. It's the first time that she would have a major role outside there, and it'd be very interesting to see that there is no Gemma around. She did this all independently and did not need her brother there to do any more finishing of her sentences, which they were known for doing. Now, she would also fight Lord Draken in the Shattered Grid along with her brother, but that'd be mainly it. Now, compared to her brother, she did a lot more. Why is this? We don't know. It's basically, I believe it's because she could deal with other people while her brother could not. Where was he, though, when she went off? It is unknown. Maybe they decided it'd be best for them to split apart, and he stayed behind to fight with Scott, and he was growing more attached to Scott and opening up to it, because it would take, even though a lot of people would look at them and go, oh, they're really functional, they were not functional whatsoever, because they were dealing with PTS problems of the fact they just constantly blew up everything they could get their hands on. Now, that is the characters of Gem and Gemma. They served as a major role as new Rangers, the 6th and 7th Ranger, even though they're marked 7th and 8th. They also did as a turning point for Dr. K of opening up and explaining a bunch of her backstory. Now, cannot be, basically, they can't have them in the series without them affecting so many different characters, even if they did not emotionally evolve themselves too much, because while they did slow down in their explosives, they didn't really. They learned that there were consequences, but it wasn't like a long-term plan of theirs. What they did learn was that they were the friends of these Rangers and they could open up more. There was hope beyond just what they were doing. Also, Dr. K was still alive. They served as examples of Dr. K still being around and her still being able to connect with human beings. Now, I liked the fact that it was a good connection with Dr. K. However, I did find their characters very annoying in the series. But I cannot complain about that. Now, their Zords were that of the Tiger Jet Zord and the Whale Zord. The Whale Zord would be used to interrupt a kiss between Summer and Dylan when he sprayed water on the burning factory that would save their lives but interrupt a very emotional moment that we've been waiting for the entire series. Thank you, Gem and Gemma. Now, that would continue on every once in a while and would go on from there for the series, but that in a nutshell is Gem and Gemma, the Gold and Silver Ranger, and that completes all the Rangers on the RPM series. I hope you guys had your favorite Ranger. Let me know in the comments below which is your favorite. You can go through them all. My personal favorite of the last episode was Dylan, because I am kind of an edgelord myself when it comes down to certain characters, and he was great. My second favorite is Ziggy, because, I don't know, he wasn't meant to be a Ranger, but he bluffed his way through that pretty well. So, I hope you guys have good reactions here, and maybe we'll do more videos on RPM as villains and or mentors, such as Dr. K or Colonel Truman. Hope to see you guys soon. Be safe, and may the power be with you always.